What's up, audit fans, and welcome to another edition of the vlog. I'm outside in my backyard today, and I've got some awesome pumpkins growing just over here. I'll see if I can. So over in that garden bed down there, you can see that's a pumpkin. I'm pretty sure it's a pumpkin growing right there. I didn't even plant pumpkins. So they are just growing on their own. I think from the compost heap. What's my dog doing? And she's out there. We're back! But welcome to Ask Amanda. I'm here in my backyard and I'm here to answer your questions that you've asked. So let's get into it. Yay! Okay. So one of the questions I had was about how auditors can be better critical thinkers, and what is critical thinking for auditors, and how can you become better at critical thinking? So I thought I'd address that one. That was a really good question. And so I think for critical thinking, one of the key things that comes in, and this comes out of ISA, ASA 200 as well, is the idea of professional skepticism. So professional skepticism is having that questioning mind. Now, that doesn't mean that we think everything is super suspicious, but we do look at everything and say, does this look real? Does this look authentic? And does this make sense? And that's especially important for auditors, I think, when you're actually gathering evidence to make your opinion. So there are different ways to actually go about collecting evidence. You might have a checklist that your firm provides. You might have like a mental list of things that you've looked at over the years and you think, okay, these are the 5 things I need to collect. Or you may have an approach which we see more often, and this is what I did my PhD thesis on, which is called the mental model type approach to evaluating audit evidence. So rather than saying I need 20 pieces, and once I hit 20, that's it. The mental model approach really is critical thinking. It's saying, do all the pieces of the puzzle for my client fit together? Is there any information I don't know? So do I have an idea of what the firm looks like, but a gap? And then we use that missing knowledge to actually go and inform our search strategies as an auditor. So, if you had a client that in the press and everywhere else was saying that they were performing really well, they were really fantastic, having a great year, but you didn't see that reflected in the financial statements, I'd be wondering what's going on. Are they potentially manipulating the accounts to achieve a bonus? Are they hiding something else? So it's all about putting that mental picture of the firm together to make sure that everything you know about the firm makes sense. And that's why it's really important to have a good understanding of your industry and accounting standards and auditing all rolled into one. And that makes the auditor's job really difficult. And it means that we have to really know a lot and be on top of our game. And it's hard because you're trying to put all these pieces of information together to actually say, this is what I think the company should do. So critical thinking is really critical. That professional skepticism. And we know that in the Lloyd's of London case, if the auditors had looked at fax evidence that they'd received, we don't have fax machines anymore, but back then there were faxes, and they would have noticed that at the top of the fax, the phone number that the fax was being sent from was from someone's home. It was evidence that someone had, I don't know why they'd have evidence at home, but they were sending it to the auditor from their home number instead of from the client. That should have been your first red flag. Then there were lots of weird shadows on the pieces of paper. And realistically, that's because it was a copy and paste job. It was take existing letters, use the scissors to cut out bits that they needed, and then actually glue them on the paper, photocopy it, and then fax it through. So professional skepticism, I think, is one of the foundations for critical thinking. And all of those, to be able to do that effectively, you need to have accounting knowledge, accounting standard knowledge, auditing standard knowledge, and knowledge of your industry. That's why it's really important that firms organize themselves along industry lines, because that means that you know your industry and you know what to expect from clients in your industry. Siva, out of the garden. Get out of the garden. Are you interested in saying hi to people at home? Say hi to people on the internet. So the other thing that somebody actually wrote to me about and said, how do we future-proof ourselves as auditors, and what does the future for auditors really look like? And I guess I know things are definitely changing, and things have changed a lot in the 20 years I've been involved in audit. We've seen obviously mass computerization at our clients, so understanding how systems work is really important, and basic IT fundamentals. Big data, I don't think is anything new. We've always analysed lots of data. And we've used different sorts of programs to analyse that data and make sense of it and try and find patterns. So I think, maybe we're doing more of that, but I don't think that it's new as such that, we see the words big data. But we might be mining it and evaluating it in different ways. What I also think is really different, and we've seen a decrease in the number of graduates that accounting firms are taking, our audit firms. And I think that's especially because of offshoring. So we're definitely seeing instances, and students who are working in audit firms are telling me that instead of actually checking evidence themselves, they're scanning in hundreds and hundreds of documents, and they're sending them to offshore processing centers in places like the Philippines and India, where the big accounting firms have offices where, for much cheaper labor, they get auditors to vouch and trace and recalculate and tick and flick. Offshoring is huge, and we know that the accounting firms all have offices in these countries where even staff from places like Australia and the countries that are using these offshoring services are sending staff over there to supervise. So this is one way that they're trying to obviously reduce cost. Now, will blockchain change the future of audit? A blockchain is meant to be secure information that both parties agree on that goes into the blockchain, and then once it's in there, it stays in there forever. Now, theoretically, if all that information is correctly verified and it meets the assertions of, for transactions, occurrence, accuracy, classification, completeness, and cutoff, and then for our balance sheet items, it's going to be existence, valuation, allocation, classification, and rights and obligations, and then presentation and disclosure for both of those. If you're sure that information that goes into the blockchain meets the ISA 315.A128 assertions, then I guess theoretically you don't need auditors, right? Because if only information that is verified goes into the blockchain, it's verified by both parties, then if you're pulling information from the blockchain to make the financial statements, theoretically it doesn't need an audit. Now, what do I see as some issues with that? Number one, if you've been an auditor, if you've worked in accounting, you know that not every single transaction that is recorded or that gets into the financial statements comes from one accounting system. You have the inventory system, and you have the sales system, and you have your accounting system, and then you have your property, plant, and equipment spreadsheet. So accounting data comes from so many places. For transactions that happen outside the firm, with an external party, then sure, blockchain might be really great, but how is blockchain going to record depreciation? Or prepaid expenses or anything else of that sort of internal nature? I think it's going to be, I don't know. So there's still going to be professional judgment in there. Blockchain is not going to remove the need for accountants to make professional judgments for accrual accounting, and therefore auditors to check accounting estimates under ISA, ASA 540. So, first off, the blockchain doesn't contain everything potentially that goes into the annual report. The second thing, I guess, is the environmental aspect of blockchain. So this is information all stored on the internet. And my understanding is that you need factories full of servers running 24 hours a day, 365 days a year to maintain the blockchain. I would presume that you also need to have backup systems running, so RAID or some other sort of mirroring backup, to make sure then that the information you have in the blockchain, if you have a power outage or some other sort of catastrophic disaster, is backed up. Because if anybody out there is watching Mr. Robot, if you lose all the information, what are you left with? Potentially chaos. So, number one, where's the blockchain backed up? How do we secure that information? Number two is the energy consumption. So we only have finite resources. And yes, we can generate electricity from renewable resources, but computers and servers come from raw materials. So is it environmentally sustainable to run the blockchain forever? Or will we get to a point where we don't have the energy to sustain the blockchain? So that to me, the environmental aspect of the significant amount of energy that's needed to run the blockchain has me concerned from a world survival perspective. The third thing is the legality of it. So obviously, blockchains store information on transactions between two parties who agree that that's what is exactly what happened. Some German researchers, I think it was, and I'll put a link to the newspaper article that I saw on this, found that the sections in the blockchain, when you store a transaction, you can also store other information. So you can put links in there, not a lot, but there is the possibility for adding other information in. And when you add other information into the blockchain, obviously people can interrogate the blockchain and you can look at it, but the thing that was quite disturbing was that in a number of blockchain units that this research looked at, they found significant numbers of links to illegal child pornography, and is awful and abominable, the situation that we have with the abuse of children. From a legal perspective, what I read was that when you have illegal material stored in the blockchain, any information that's contained in there cannot be reliable and is technically not legal because it's stored in a place where there's also illegal information. So web links to child pornography or child pornographic materials themselves. So then the question becomes, because obviously, blockchain, Bitcoin, we think about the dark web and illegal transactions, but if this is coming into the mainstream, then how do we make sure that the blockchain is only used for transactions that are entirely appropriate? So the future is very unclear. I've actually set blockchain and the future of audit as a topic for my students this semester. We're going to spend 1 week looking at emerging technologies, and whether blockchain will replace the need for an audit, I think is just, there's too many variables in that to make a decision now and say, yes, definitely, or no, definitely not, but definitely something to have on the horizon. So wow, oh my God, I'm just looking at the timer on my camera. I've talked for a whole lot. So that's it for Ask Amanda this week. If you've got any questions that you're burning for me to answer, then pop them in the comments or ask them to me on social media and I'll try and get to them in a future video. Bye! I'm gonna try and stop my dog from getting into the gardens. Out of the gardens even now. Out!